We have breaking news now. Things are getting heated between former President Trump and the judge as Trump testifies in the civil fraud trial against him, his older sons, and his business. The judge is visibly frustrated with Trump's answers, telling him, quote, "This is not a political rally. This is a courtroom." The judge has even demanded that Trump's lawyers, quote, "control their client." Now, keep in mind, this judge has already ruled Trump and his adult sons are liable for using false and misleading statements to conduct business. Now, Trump's testimony could determine how they'll be penalized. Let's bring in ABC News executive editorial producer John Santucci, ABC News chief Washington correspondent John Karl, and ABC News legal contributor Shauna Lloyd, as well as ABC News senior reporter Catherine Falders for more. John Santucci, what is Trump doing here that has the judge so frustrated?
Well, he's answering the questions, but then he's adding on a lot more. He's attacking the attorney general. He is attacking the judge. He's just making these offhanded comments. And what's interesting, and a note from our Olivia Rubin, who's sitting in the courtroom watching it all play out in real time, her reporting right now is that Trump is doing it, not raising his voice, clearly aggravating the judge. At multiple points, the judge saying this is not a political forum, stop giving speeches. He is striking comments from Donald Trump on the record, and Donald Trump smiling, enjoying what he's doing, clearly getting under the judge's skin. And look, we know from what our reporting has shown over the last couple of days that Donald Trump has grown angry and angrier about this case. We know that he did a prep session last night in Trump Tower before heading down to that courtroom. And as one source had said to me, Diane, that there's going to be two Donald Trumps that show up. One is just going to answer the questions and behave, or the other guy. And so far, less than an hour in, I think the other guy has clearly shown up and is clearly getting under this judge's skin.
John Karl, you've written 3 books on Trump now. What do you make of this testimony so far? Is this a strategy?
It's clearly a strategy. This is not so much a legal strategy, but a political strategy. Trump has made the various cases against him, the 4 criminal cases, and this civil case against his company, really what he is campaigning about. He is campaigning as a victim, somebody who has been mistreated by our criminal justice system and by the Attorney General here in New York. This is a campaign of revenge and retribution. I think it's interesting that if you look over the past couple of weeks, he has spent more time in that courtroom than he has out doing actual campaigning. This is what he wants to be talking about. And it's interesting, you know, this is the first time we've actually seen him take the stand to testify in one of these cases in a live courtroom under oath. He's appeared at the arraignments. He's appeared to watch the proceedings in this case. But to see him actually take the stand, and John, you know, and points out, Olivia says that Trump is saying things that are very antagonistic of the judge, but he is doing it in a subdued manner. I imagine he'll be less subdued once he gets outside of the courtroom.
Well, so let's bring that point to John Santucci. John, how different is it for Trump to now be speaking on the stand under oath versus what he's used to in front of the television cameras, in front of news cameras, at a political rally, that kind of thing?
Yeah, all those kinds of things, and there's been a lot of them. Look, I think so far it seems like he's still doing the same thing. I just think the tone is different. I mean, you know, it's so unfortunate there are no cameras in New York State Court, but if we look at what Donald Trump did just moments before entering that courtroom, the tone, the attacks against the Attorney General and the courts and all of the cases. Of course, he's not just referencing this case in Lower Manhattan. He is referencing that plus the other 4 criminal cases that are currently against him. But he's doing it now from the stand. It seems, based on the reporting, a little more toned down for Donald Trump. And obviously, the other thing that he's doing right now from the stand, as we've seen from our team that's reporting it out in real time, Diane, they're going through every parcel of Donald Trump's property Rolodex. They're going through Mar-a-Lago. They're going through Trump Tower. They're going through 40 Wall Street, a building he owns also in Lower Manhattan. So this is going to be a part of the thing that's going to annoy Donald Trump and where we're going to see potentially the questions get under his skin. And it's only been an hour so far, so if they say something about the evaluations, if they attack any of the properties, obviously, as we know in the deposition, he once referred to one of his properties as the Mona Lisa. If anything is done in that courtroom to annoy Donald Trump, I think that's where the temperature is going to heat up.
Shauna, it might be a good political strategy. What do you make of it as a legal strategy? How unusual is it for a defendant to be on the stand criticizing a judge like this?
Well, there's nothing usual about this or anything that's happening. That is very untypical of any defendant. You typically do not want to attack a judge in this manner. However, we have to remember that there is no jury. These are only the judge. So this may be an attempt to get this judge to say something or make a ruling that could later cause for an appellate record, because that's something that can be seen as appealable. So that might be the strategy and what we see, the way he's attacking this judge.
Catherine, Trump is facing a number of other cases in addition to this one. There are some familiar faces in that courtroom, though. Talk to me about the whole environment, what he has to keep in mind with these other cases pending, and how careful he has to be with what he says today regarding how it could impact those cases.
Right. I think not only are you seeing his political campaign and his legal troubles becoming one and the same inside that courtroom. What was striking to me in that image that you saw, that brief image that you saw of Donald Trump, it was Trump seated in between his two lawyers representing him in this case. In that image, you could also see senior members of his campaign, for example, sitting in the back. And also in that image, you could see other lawyers representing him, one of whom was Todd Blanche, who's not representing him in this case, but is the lead attorney on those criminal cases as it relates to the January 6th investigation and the documents investigation as well. So you see all of these elements colliding here, and you have seen what Trump has said outside this courtroom, for example, affect what's happening in the criminal investigations. For example, as it relates to the gag order that he's under in this case currently, it is precisely those comments that Special Counsel Jack Smith's team represented in Washington in the January 6th case to try and get the judge to enforce a gag order here. Now, that was in place pending appeal. It's gone up to the circuit level. We'll have to see what the circuit decides, likely to be back in place. But what Trump says does have an effect on the other cases, regardless of whether or not the charges are the same.
And we just saw former President Trump leaving that courtroom. It looks like they just took a break, so everyone's leaving the courtroom for a little bit. John Santucci, what are you hearing about what it's like inside that courtroom, or at least what it was like before they all walked out?
I was just texting with our colleague in the control room because these notes coming from our Luke Brueggemann are striking, Diane. At one point, the judge saying, "I beseech you to control him," speaking to Christopher Kise, Trump's attorney. "If you can't, I will." And this obviously is the tension that is going on right now, because as the judge has said to Trump multiple times, you're not answering the questions. You're giving speeches. You keep talking, like, just get the answer done and move on. But I think it's just wild to see that the judge is multiple moments asking them to basically rein him in. There's another instance here from our team where Erdogan fires back and says, "I'm not here to hear what he has to say," referring to all of those speeches. So to think that this is just an hour, they've just taken a break and things are already this hot, and they really haven't even gotten into a lot of the meat and potatoes of what this case is. They've only started, Diane, going into the evaluations and the process. But it's going to be a lot of what we saw from Donald Trump Jr. and Eric that's about to come. Getting Donald Trump to actually comment on some of the documents that were prepared, presented to the banks, presented when tax time came due. Why did you sign this? Did you evaluate it? That is where I think you're going to see things get even warmer.
And our investigative reporter, Olivia Rubin, was inside the courtroom. Olivia, how is Trump responding when the judge comes out and says these things and says, listen, just answer the question. We're not here for your political speeches. How is Trump reacting to that?
Well, it's a really remarkable dynamic, Diane, because for anyone that knows Donald Trump, he is reactive, he is expressive. We have seen him go out into the hallway on previous days that he's here and yell at the cameras, but that is not the Donald Trump that we are seeing inside of the courtroom today. He has remained remarkably calm. He has been answering polite, although long and winding answers, which is what the judge has an issue with. And Diane, he is hardly even looking at the judge as he repeatedly steps in to cut Trump off and ask Chris Kise, his attorney, to please have his client keep his answers short. Hardly even one time sitting in that court for 45 minutes, Diane, did we see Donald Trump look at the judge. Instead, we have seen him look straight forward, look down at the witness stand, at the papers in front of him. But he has been shaking his head. He looks at his lawyers. At one point, his face grew a bit red, but really very little reaction from Donald Trump, who has somehow managed to remain remarkably calm through these repeated tense interactions from the judge and his attorney as the judge is trying to keep Donald Trump answers on track, Diane.
And John, at this point, Trump has two things to weigh, right? On the one hand, he's in a courtroom and he's on the line here. On the other hand, he also knows that the cameras are on him and the nation is watching right now. So what does he have to consider in terms of what he says on the stand? Being the judge already found him guilty in the largest portion of this case, is this about New York, or is this about trying to take advantage of this moment in the spotlight?
Well, which John?
Yeah, which John?
Oh, sorry, John Carl.
Look, this trial gets at the essence of who Donald Trump likes to say he is. He portrays himself as the ultimate, most successful business mogul the world has ever seen. He's the master of the art of the deal. And this entire case is getting at an accusation that he's exaggerated the value of his properties and, by extension, the success of his business ventures. This is a guy that, threatened legal action against Forbes magazine for not rating him, among the world's richest people. So this is, I think, that you can talk about strategy, you can talk about the political strategy, the possible legal strategy, but there's also an emotional element here that is not strategic at all. I think the reason why this case in some ways has attracted more of his attention than even the criminal cases is because it gets at that essential image that he has built for himself long before he even got into politics. This is trying to pierce the notion, a lot of people have for many years said Donald Trump is nowhere near as successful or as rich as he claims to be. And now you have a court case based on that. I thought that was interesting, by the way, when he went by there, he kind of zips his lip, because what he's saying there, I believe, is not just that he's not going to talk there, but he's accusing the court of silencing him as a presidential candidate, not allowing him to say what he wants to on that stand. And the accounts inside the courtroom are really quite fascinating. I mean, you have the judge telling his lawyer, telling Kais to control your clients, and saying, if you can't control him, I will. I mean, this is one of the big questions we had going into this, is would Trump violate the judge's orders just with his words from the stand? And it looks like he's basically there.
So, Shauna, what recourse does the judge have, right? This judge is repeatedly asking Trump's attorneys, rein your client in, control your client, et cetera. What if they don't?
If he doesn't, then what we're looking at is a contempt. The judge can charge him with contempt. He could be put in jail temporarily. There are ramifications for not listening to the judge. But I think what we see is a judge that's trying to temper his ability to defend himself as a defendant in this trial, especially because this is a bench trial. There is no jury. So the judge is the judge and the jury. And so what we see is he's trying to strike this balance. But at the end, he can still hold him in contempt for not answering these questions in the manner in which the judge feels that he should be answering them.
All right, investigative reporter Olivia Rubin, executive editorial producer John Santucci, our chief Washington correspondent John Carl, senior reporter Catherine Falders, legal contributor Shauna Lloyd. Thank you all.